How you doing?
Welcome. Really good. Thanks for being here. All right,
Thank you for having me.
of course, welcome everybody to the first day and second event of Sales Reimagined, our 3-day Revenue Excellence Summit. I'm Gina Hawley. I'm the community manager at Modern Sales Pros, and I'm here to introduce today's event. So for those of you who aren't familiar, MSP or Modern Sales Pros is the world's largest and highest quality community for those in sales management, sales leadership, sales and revenue operations, sales enablement, development, and the related disciplines. Our mission here is to create an environment for our members, all of the things, related disciplines, that is the catch-all there. But you join MSP because you're here to answer the toughest revenue questions you have. So if you're not a member yet, we'll invite you to be a member after the summit. So hope y'all will join us. Next up, this summit would not be possible without our amazing sponsors who you see on this slide. So kudos to them for making this happen. These amazing organizations are not only sponsoring this specific event, but all 3 days and 17 events of this summit. So to learn more about these innovative companies, click on the Sponsor Booths tab at the top of the event page and check out all of the ungated and valuable resources that they have available just for us this week. There might also be some cool and fun surprises in there, so you want to make sure that you go check out the sponsor booths. Yeah, you got to look around though. There might be some Easter eggs. Okay.
Gotta go hunting.
This week's summit.
We're on a sales excellence.
Yeah. And luckily, you can be watching this event while also being in the booth, so you can do both at the same time, but definitely pay attention to this event. All right, so this week, we've got a ton of events and content for you. It'll be full of ways that you can completely reimagine sales. So whether you're in sales, marketing, customer success, product, there's going to be something for you. Now, this event that you're here watching is the second event of our summit. It's a fantastic fireside chat with Andy Byrne, co-founder and CEO at Clari. And you can check out what we have going on for the rest of the week in the agenda tab at the top of this page. Okay, so now here's the agenda for this session. I'll go over some housekeeping notes. The speakers will do intros, they'll get into the content, and then we'll have some time for Q&A after. But before I hand things off to our amazing speakers, of course, we have some housekeeping notes because we always get this question. Yes, this event is being recorded and you'll be able to watch it afterwards. You'll also be able to see key takeaways on the summit page on the MSP website after this event. Secondly, familiarize yourself with Goldcast. If you have a question for our speakers, use the Q&A function on the right side of your screen. You can also chat with each other, direct message each other, see who else is here live, and comment on what our speakers are talking about. Let us know what you think. And lastly, go ahead and check out all of our amazing speakers and sponsors by navigating at the tabs on the top of your screen. But okay, enough from me. Let's get started. So we have the one and only Pete Kazanji, co-founder and CRO at Atrium, who will be our moderator for this morning's fireside chat. So go ahead and...
Oh, cut out there for a second. Hey guys, how's it going? I am so excited to be hanging out with Andy here today. Hey Andy, how you doing?
Doing great. How you doing, Pete?
I'm hanging in there. Although somebody was kind of commenting to me, my fig plant needs a little help back here.
Yeah, what is that? Is that a? Looks like I know a green thumb that is lacking.
Yeah, no green thumbs here. I'm very good at email and PowerPoint, but not that. Yeah. Well, wanted to introduce Andy here. I think everybody is very familiar with Clari. It's like a household name in our industry. For folks that don't know me, I'm Pete Kazanji. I'm one of the founders of Atrium. Atrium makes data-driven sales management software that exists to help sales managers use metrics and data to improve team performance. And I'm also the founder of Modern Sales Pros, both of which were kind of like my second act after sold my last software company, TalentBin, to Monster Worldwide in 2014, and then wrote a book on startup sales called Founding Sales that maybe some of you have a copy of. So that's a little bit about me. Andy, is a bellwether in the industry, obviously the founder of Clari, has been doing that for nearly about like 9 years, I want to say.
We have my 10-year anniversary comes up this week.
Wow, 10 years. It's been a hot second. It turns out like modernizing sales, it's not an overnight thing, huh? Before that, he's been a multi-time sales leader. Previously, he was a founder of another software company as well. So, Andy, maybe you can tell folks a little bit about your background before we can kind of talk about how Clari got started.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in and around sales for now coming up almost on 30 years, which is crazy to say.
You started when you were 9? That's crazy.
Yeah, exactly. I'm 52. And the journey with Clari has been fascinating. I always felt like there's never really been software that was built for sales teams, and that's kind of how we started it. I've been experiencing lots of pain in and around sales my whole career. So, but I'm kind of a glutton. I love creating something from nothing. So, people say serial entrepreneur. I don't know if I'd call it that, but I would say that what drives me is two things. One, creating something from nothing, and two, now that I'm later in my career, seeing the growth in people, helping them realize their fullest potential, whether it's our customers, our employees. And I'm just feeling like I'm having the best time of my life right now. I feel a lot of gratitude.
Nice. That's awesome. Well, I know that collaboration is going to be a theme that we're going to touch on a little bit later. And of course, that's, excellent collaboration is what drives, great teams, and, excellent collaboration and great teams is what makes like lifelong career connections and network. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. But I think what would be really that folks might appreciate, since everyone here is very familiar, I'm sure, with Clari, but maybe not so familiar with like how it got started, and kind of like what the inspiration was for that. So maybe you could share a little bit about like what the aha moment was. Probably had something to do with like maybe trying to like update Salesforce or Siebel for the 10th time when the page crashed or something. I don't know. What were the aha moments?
Well, it's interesting. This story it actually starts with I went to Sequoia Capital and I was walking around the parking lot with a handful of the partners there, just brainstorming about ideas. We had just sold our previous company, Clearwell, to Symantec, and it was a very nice outcome for lots of folks. We felt kind of like we got to the Western Conference Finals and we lost. Like there's a handful of us that did not want to sell because we had such a great business. So we wanted to do it again. And what was driving me was this idea that I felt like that there could be something that could help sales reps close deals faster, help managers drive more revenue, help execs boost the accuracy and predictability of their forecast, because I was just starting to think through about all of the tools that we use to try to
how big was Clearwell's sales org when you guys were acquired by Symantec? Was it
Symantec? Yeah, I think that org at that point was about 250 folks in the org.
Okay.
At that point.
Yeah. So like 50. So like, a pretty complicated sales organization with like a lot of you
guys were probably running off of like multi-geo, multi-segment. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. It was your classic sophisticated revenue rubric for sure.
Yeah. So
that's how it got started. And we realized that the CRM and ERP systems were not doing machine learning at scale. And at Clearwell, we did natural language processing and machine learning at scale. So we had this idea of, could you build a new data store that could look at lots of different signal that's happening out there and start to historically snapshot it and start to predict the future of what might happen on a deal, on a rep's quota, on a territory in a particular region, a product line, and then help, drive more revenue more predictably and more efficiently. So that's the thesis we took to Sequoia. And that's kind of how this thing all got started.
Got it. And they were like, Andy, we're in. Here you go. And it was just like they backed up the truck. It was like a big pile of money, or was there, there was a term sheet for it?
I thought it was going to be that simple. I was thinking, having done 4 companies with Sequoia, it was not that simple. They still had the same level of rigor and diligence, and it was actually relatively. It was a lot of hard work to get that Series A raise for sure. But here we are. We're now 10 years in, and we've got over 850 customers now, and they're some of the best companies in the world that are running our platform and helping them answer the most important question in business: are they going to meet, beat, or miss on revenue? And helping them go from revenue leak to revenue precision in a way that allows them to realize the company's fullest potential. So it's been a really fun ride.
Yeah, so it's funny that you mentioned that the fundraising wasn't as smooth as maybe one would expect from a multi-time exited founder. I feel that like maybe people could probably appreciate that right now, kind of the current economic, or at least like in the tech industry, kind of like the wobbliness that's happening there. I know that you guys put out this really interesting deck. This, I guess it's called the Thrive deck. We're not here to survive. We're here to thrive, right? And I know that it's been getting a lot of attention. Certainly I've seen it, being tweeted around, posted on LinkedIn, in my inbox, et cetera, et cetera. And I know that you've been kind of making the rounds with it as well. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about, where it came from, kind of the inspiration for it, kind of the thesis, and kind of like the high level message, and we can share it with folks as well.
Yeah, I think the deck has just been crazy how much it's so viral out there in the community. I would say that the number one reason why I think it's getting traction is that there's just this insatiable desire and or movement for companies to want to modernize the way they run revenue.
Right.
And if you look at the systems that they've had, that they're currently using, they're 3 decades old. It's crazy. Yep. And as a result, there's blind spots, there is manual processes, there's a bunch of revenue leak that's happening all over the place. And as we did the math behind revenue leak, it was pretty stunning. If you think about the data, over $2 trillion worth of revenue was lost last 12 months due to revenue leak. And our own research that we did, and that was, by the way, a study that came through from BCG, Boston Consulting Group, saying that's the math behind revenue leak. Our own Clari Labs research suggests that when we did polling of over 2,000 customers, that they lost 15% of their revenue that they could have captured over the last 12 months. So, and that math worked out to roughly $15 billion worth of lost revenue across the 2,000 companies that we polled. So the second reason is just the math behind revenue leak is it's just massive. It's the biggest problem hiding in plain sight, Pete.
I mean, $1 billion here, $1 billion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. Like turns out.
Well, I always say, like, to my engineers, we're not in the business of building software, and we're in the business of helping really smart people solve really hard problems in the most important business process in the company. Before Clari, people didn't think about. They thought about revenue as more of an outcome. They didn't really think, okay, we can run revenue like a process.
Yeah.
And now you can.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, I think this is something that we think about quite a bit at Atrium. One when I explain to people over beers usually, or over a fireside chat, kind of the inspiration for what we do at Atrium, it really kind of comes down to two kind of like foundational texts. Actually, one is The Score Takes Care of Itself by Bill Walsh. Bill Walsh is a coach of the San Francisco 49ers, Stanford football team, et cetera. And kind of the premise there being that, like, look, you really can't think about these outcomes over here. You have to, because like they're not really controllable, but you can control these inputs like way over here. And if you do those excellently, good things like the outcomes will come. Then the second one was a book. It's a process engineering book called The Goal by Eli Goldratt. And it's actually, it was like a novelization of the Toyota lean manufacturing, kind of like the insights of Toyota lean manufacturing. But point being that, like, if you take those two things together and you apply it to a sales organization, like we all run revenue factories, right? And it's not just like it's not that like widgets come out the back end magically through like there's a whole factory, and there's like collaboration and instrumentation, and like, and there's a whole thing. And I totally hear you about how the way that this happened back in the day was it kind of felt more like magic. Whereas now, of course, now the nice thing is we have data, and so we can instrument the factory and and intervene where there are problems. And so I assume that the Thrive deck kind of gets into that in pretty meaningful fashion, kind of talking about the different ways that you can avoid revenue leak and how to think about that.
Well, I love your word that you used around instrumentation, right? And the boards that we talk to, the CEOs that we talk to, are thinking, hey, how do I instrument the entire end-to-end process, right? And that's what we're doing. And we have what's called a revenue leak assessment, right? That we're offering, especially in this environment, right? That every drop of revenue matters right now, Pete. And when you think about, you think about revenue metaphorically as a funnel, right? Where at the top, it's really wide and it gets very, very narrow. You've got, our customers have hundreds of thousands of leads that those then convert to opportunities that convert to then, close business. And in that funnel, there's all kinds of areas where the CEOs and the boards have no idea what kind of leak they have. They don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know.
Yeah. Where's it showing up?
All these contacts that have never been targeted, all these leads that have gone stale, opportunities that have been lost to the competition, or deals that are in commit where the reps didn't really know that the customer didn't have budget. So these are examples. Exactly, these are examples of being able to instrument and know in real time everything that's going on, right? And for a CEO to understand, hey, are we going to meet, beat, or miss? For people to go from all this leak to precision, I'm going to go back to your word, is that you need the instrumentation, right? You need to be able to see all the signal, all the email data, all the calendar data, all the relationship, all the conversational intelligence data, all of it, and use a system that allows the CRO to run their 13-week cadence in a process-like way that allows them to realize their fullest potential and to get to revenue precision, which is the company's ability to get to full capacity on revenue reliably, predictably, repeatedly. That's possible. Even in this environment, we've seen, customers like Pure Storage, Okta, others who have not just focused on cost cutting, but they've focused on being able to shore up, protect, and find areas of growth. And they're performing well in what is a very tough environment.
Yeah, I think the way that I like when I pitch investors on these topics, one of the metaphors that I like to use is the traditional like data acquisition or SCADA software, so like supervisory control and data acquisition software that historically has been used for factories, right? Like the sort of thing that that Siemens, sales organizations, what have you. Those are things that have been like table stakes in these very process-driven manufacturing environments and what have you. And then we're over here doing this arguably very important thing, revenue, and it's just kind of like loosey goosey, like shooting from the hip, et cetera. And it deserves the same level of level of instrumentation and precision. And in fairness, like I think if you like, not to be too hard on all of us sales leaders and what have you, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, the ability to actually collect the data in order to then interrogate it was like much harder, right? Like, you were lucky if reps were putting opportunities into Siebel. I mean, even now, like, you're lucky if you're getting certain information into the CRM, whereas the amount of actual, like, communication and actual activity that is happening in a digitalized era is very substantial, like whether they're talking about email or LinkedIn or calendar or like, video or Zoom or what have you. The amount of data that's available has exploded. And so, like, people are just kind of catching up. Like, it's kind of like the muscles weren't there in the pre-Moneyball era, right?
I think that's right. I would say that, if you think about my analogy, I occasionally use is, when I think about an instrumentation of your revenue process, getting all the data, no blind spots, is that you look at, network monitoring and application monitoring, right? You can see all the packets, you can see the latency, you can see all this stuff real time. It can predict when it's going to go down poorly, whatever it might be. In our case, when you have now, for the first time, you have this ability to instrument everything. What we saw was, hey, we were helping reps close their deals faster. We were helping managers drive more revenue. We were helping execs boost the predictability and accuracy of their forecast. And then what started to happen, Pete, for us is that we started to see people outside of sales teams using Clari, right? Marketing was coming into Clari to be able to use our platform to predict how much pipeline do they need to create for Q+1 and Q+2 CS. How do you run net dollar retention, upsell, cross-sell, and started to expand. And we realized, wow, in some cases, this is just a profound point, is that some of our customers, over 50% of their employee base are revenue critical, right? They're not just in sales, they're in pre-sales, post-sales, they're in marketing, they're in finance, right? It's boardroom all the way down to frontline. All these revenue critical employees want to be in one system, and yet there's never been an enterprise system that allows them to all collaborate to help them realize their fullest potential around one topic, run revenue. So that was a big aha over the last probably 2 years for us, is that it's not about rev ops, it's about revenue. And, you need to, give the company the ability to have all revenue critical employees collaborate. And then the second thing I'll say is that we had this thing happen in COVID, and the same thing that's happening right now in this economic downturn happened in COVID for us. What happened?
Right.
We saw usage off the charts, right? Because people needed visibility into their every dimension of their revenue, whether it's forecast, pipeline, net dollar retention, upsell, cross-sell, account penetration, all these different dimensions. And the execs were trying to control everything. They wanted to govern the process of revenue. So on one hand, we had this desire for people to collaborate, to be able to make sure that they could run revenue. And the executives that were all in Clari and running Clari, all the way up to the CEOs that are in Clari 3, 4, 5 times a week, are saying, hey, how do we govern and control it? And this idea about revenue collaboration and governance is something that's just kind of really taking off across all of our customer base.
Yeah. And I think that there's kind of going back to what you were saying earlier about the organizations that you're working with that are really thriving right now. I think probably one of the reasons why you guys are seeing that high level of utilization is because people are really, they're really concerned about what's going down in the market, and they're trying to look ahead of things. Like, we hear this from our customers as well, right? Where people come to their CSM, they're like, hey, we would really love to put together some resources in Atrium around leading indicators. Like, what are the leading edge indicators where we can see if there's deterioration happening in our business? Can we see where it's happening on which team, with all the way down to the rep level, et cetera. But I think one of the challenges that organizations have is they then when they're concerned, they kind of feel like the only thing that they can do is like cut. Right. And I think we saw this during COVID as well, where you had a bunch of people whose like knee-jerk reaction was like, okay, let's like riff 20% of the sales team or 30% of the sales team or whatever. And like lo and behold, after the fact, it was like kind of a boo-boo. And they ended up, going off the charts with this, and like missed a bunch of revenue as a result, because they were underutilized, or like they had way overutilized, under resourced reps. And I think that you guys talk about this a little bit, where cost cutting is really just kind of like half the battle with respect to a successful strategy.
Well, I guess the conversations it's really about what are CEOs and CFOs doing today that's different, like than previous downturns. So I was part of the .com, experienced the great financial crisis as well. The conversations back then were really just about cost cutting. Mm-hmm. Now it's about cost cutting. It's also about how do they think about pockets of revenue. A lot of our customers, right, they have a recurring revenue business. They have a consumption-oriented business. And They want to be able to find moments where they can actually not just shore it up, but be able to grow that. And I'll give you an example. We had there was a customer of ours, publicly traded company, just dropped in a CEO, 5,000 employees, trying to figure. And the CEO comes in, and of course the CEO wanted to figure out all these different dimensions of revenue and ask all these questions. And the data was coming from Excel, it was coming from CRM, it was coming from Tableau, and it was just a mess. Numbers weren't tying out, and there was a trust issue. CEO calls us, we drop in our revenue platform, and within a matter of 1 or 2 days, we were able to show that CEO every single dimension of their revenue, exactly where they were having leak, and the process by which they could shore up that leak. And they got to from a position where they were feeling like they were blind and weren't sure where they were going to land, to giving the CEO confidence that are they going to beat or miss. And it's in this environment, it's not necessarily about beating number, it's about certainty, predictability. And in our case, that's what we're hearing from customers. So it's cost, and it's also revenue precision, if you will.
Yeah. What would be some examples of like the pathologies that like drive revenue leak, right? Like what are because you're saying, hey, we can identify it, and of course like the most important thing is identification is all well and good, but then we want to like get it right, like tackle it. What are the kind of like the most common examples?
So I'll give you 2 examples. So one example is just recently we had identified in new logo business a company's there was at the end of the quarter, they were slipping a bunch of commit deals. And it was this behavior that we saw happening quarter over quarter. And it actually was around a cohort of reps that were kind of their bottom tier reps. And we realized, hey, they weren't doing their sequence of events at the end to be able to really get the customer to commit, to really line up budget, et cetera. And we saw that across a wide range of deals. And we were able to then go back, identify that very, very quickly, re-enable those teams. And in the next quarter, they were able that slip rate, that conversion rate, slip rates reduced by over 12%, and conversion rates increased by that same number. And that was a significant area of leak and a significant area of shoring up that revenue potential. We had another situation where in a recurring revenue business where they were focused on upsell, cross-sell, and just listening to the conversations that were happening across new reps. They were struggling selling a new product, and we were able to isolate pipeline that was a very significant portion of their net dollar retention pipeline goal, where reps were not achieving the ability to convert those new products. And we were very easily able to go in there and showcase how we could change that and allow them. In some cases, these reps weren't even trying to sell the product. So it was that insight we got on an aggregated basis that allowed us to go in and then drive a net dollar from 125 to 140 in that instance. So those are two examples of where we have the ability to proactively see that signal, identify that leak, and then move from a world where they're leaking it to where they precisely know what's going to happen and be able to actively know, are they going to meet, beat, or miss on those dimensions, if that makes sense, Pete.
Yeah, I mean, because the remediation is the key, right? Like, it's all well and often. I remember when we were doing our early research, excuse me, for Atrium back in 2016, we did about 150 customer interviews with like sales leaders, sales operations folks, CFOs, et cetera. And I remember having this really thoughtful conversation with the head of people analytics at Facebook. The guy's name is like totally gone to the mist of time in my brain, unfortunately. And he had this like great kind of framing for like tactical analytics, like you know, like right here at the ground level. And it was like, what? So what? Now what? Right? And I think that's really important. And this is something that we see with our customers. It's all well and good. And like, I think this is the challenge with traditional analytics, like, you know, your tableaus, your lookers, whatever. It's like, oh, that's a pretty chart or what have you. But it's like, well, why does that matter? And then importantly, what are we going to do about it? Like, hey, we've got this rep right here and he's got this win rate problem, but specifically where his win rate, like, it's not across all of his deals. He's got a win rate problem and his large ops. And so we need to enable him and to fix that and coach him up. And like, so the now what to remediate that, because otherwise, guess what? Like, we can try to like stick holes in like, you know, his deals all day long. But like, if he's got this specific pathology or she's got this specific pathology, we got to fix that, or they're going to have that pathology across all of their all their ops. You had mentioned.
Can I just comment on that, Pete? What I find is really interesting about that is that is an instance in time for, we'll call it a node, which is that rep that's on this tree that is the revenue tree, for example, like metaphorically, right? You got the boardroom all the way down to the front line, and this is happening all over the place. Just rolling out a forecast tab is not really going to allow you to run that entire revenue cadence like a process, right? And so, you know, I'll go back to your commentary on first, you have to have the instrumentation. And for the people that are listening to this, they have to really go back to their head of revenue and ask, what is our instrumentation strategy? What are we monitoring and not monitoring? Do we have historical? Do we have real time? Do we have predictive? Right? And then how are we actually using that instrumentation in our 13-week cadence, week 1 to week 13, and how we run the quarter for new logo, net dollar retention, pipe creation, and more, right? And those are the questions that people need to be asking. And once they start asking those questions, they'll realize that they have a bunch of areas where they don't even know that they're leaking because they have a bunch of blind spots. And they can start to have a real dialogue about, hey, how do we move from leak to precision? And then how, and this is the provocative thing, how do we run revenue like a process, to your point, Pete, right? And the craziest thing is it's the most important goddamn process in the company. Right. And yet it's run on systems that are 3 decades old. I mean, come on, you know, and I think what's happening is across the private equity community and all of the folks that we work with, from Vista to Warburg to Silver Lake to Blackstone to others, are realizing this, right? That, you know, it can't be done in the old way. It has to be done in an enterprise-ready, enterprise-wide system that allows them to, in simple terms, run revenue.
Yeah. One of the kind of like data availability things that's new, and you kind of mentioned this earlier, because like with the more data availability, the questions that you can ask, or to kind of use you guys as framing, like the sources of leak like the leak pathologies that can be identified can enhance, right? So a good example of this would be, I was talking about like, statistical or numeric identification, like, hey, this rep has a win rate problem and his win rate is related to ops that are of this size right here, right? Those are all like numeric, right? Or this rep has an ASP problem and his ASP is the result of deal compression at the end of, down in a down funnel state because he's dropping his pants on price or he's compressing the deal or whatever. Those are great like sources of revenue leaks in and of themselves and like important pathologies to identify. But then when you get to things like call recording and kind of natural language processing, which obviously you have a background in, now it's being applied to sales, you can get even further along where you can say things like, hey, this deal that's like down funnel, like ain't no one talked about budget or purchasing or what have you. And I know that you guys just made a strategic acquisition, I think, in this space. Maybe you can talk about how that's going to fold into Clari and what have you.
Yeah, so we acquired a company called Wingman, which we're really excited about. We actually deployed it internally, and we're just blown away by it. It just I had it working on I said, hey, I want to see the product. My team was so excited about it. They said, hey, you gotta take a look at this. And what we realized is that the conversational intelligence combined with all of the other signal that we offer, right? If you look at we've been analyzing the emails now for 10 years, we've been looking at calendar data, we've been looking at attachment data, we've been looking at relationship data. Adding the conversational intelligence data is really, really powerful. And we not only support all the other conversational intelligence systems where we can analyze that data as well, we have this now also. And we realize that it's a very powerful signal to allow us to have a little bit more high fidelity. But, just having that signal alone is not going to do it. Just being able to say, the talk time was X, or or somebody didn't bring up budget is Y. It's getting that signal into a revenue process, into a cadence, aggregating that up and having a CRO say, okay, how do they get access and value from that data? It's super valuable for maybe a manager to say on a Sunday, I want to hear Pete's conversation, and maybe
I'm gonna listen to 10 calls at 1.5x while I'm mountain biking. Maybe.
Right. It's so much more than call recording, right?
Yeah.
And playback. So our view is that it's really great signal that we're adding to our revenue platform, of which we have more signal that we're analyzing than anyone else out there. And, we like, and we're just super excited about the company. The team is really fabulous. And it's our second acquisition that we've done. And, we're excited in this market, since we're in a really strong position. We, got very lucky in that our last round that we raised was end of December. Luck makes you look smart.
Good timing.
Good timing. And, there's a lot of interesting opportunities out there, in terms of being able to grow our value footprint. Having said that, we're going to be smart. We're going to be, practical. We were looking at the CI market for 3 years, just studying it. And we like the move. We'll see how it plays out.
Yeah, for sure. I hear what you're saying around, like, I mean, most of the time when you think about like traditional conversation intelligence, it's kind of has had like epochs associated with, like, early on, kind of the dirty secret of conversational intelligence was like, it was primarily for like reps to use, like, hey, when is the CFO coming back from paternity leave? Like, I forget, and go back and listen to their own call, because it turns out that like doing active coaching like that, like listening to all those calls, like it's pretty calorically intensive for a manager, right?
Right.
And so this is actually one of the reasons why we ended up integrating with the Gongs and the other CI providers of the world, because once you can take that data and then like up level and do analysis on it, you can see things like, oh man, it actually turns out that this team over here, this one team, this mid-market team, not this one, but this group of 8 reps right here versus the 50 reps in the company, they're skipping out on the disco question as relates to, you know, some key value proposition there. And so if you're only listening to calls, right, like as a leader, you'd have to identify that across, like, you know, you'd have to whack-a-mole across all of the different reps in order to identify that, versus if that information is like up leveled to be interrogated, as you were kind of noting, in a way to like into a revenue process, or in the case with Atrium, that information goes into like a data-driven sales management harness. Now you can identify like broad pathologies. Either it's an individual right here, like, hey man, like you're forgetting to ask this disco question as relates to, I don't know, use us as an example, like rep ramping, right? And let's fix that. Or if you have that across an entire organization, or it's like, hey, you know what? You guys just paid 200 grand for like command of the message or whatever, and guess what? Like half of the organization has not adopted any of the, you know, any of the new talk tracks. That's a really important, like that'll drive revenue leak right there, right?
So let me just mention, Pete, that last piece you mentioned is governance, right? So we're using conversational intelligence to govern. Are they running MedPick? Yes or no? See it on an aggregated basis, right? If you think about the collaboration that happens between a manager and a rep, or that regional director that can see, of all my commit deals, which ones have we talked about price, right? And I can see that over, you know, my commit inventory of 10.5 million, that there's 2 million where we haven't talked price, right? And that drives collaboration. So this notion of being able to use CI to drive better collaboration, to help the revenue critical employees realize their fullest potential, right? And then the ability to use it as well to have this governance process and make sure everybody's doing exactly what they want them to do, which is what do you hear the CRO always say? CRO says, I'm trying to drive consistent, disciplined behavior across my reps, thousands of reps. How can they all do the same thing that I want them to do? And if I can do that at scale, right? And that's trying to govern and control a process. And now it's possible to have everybody collaborate around revenue and have everybody have it governed as a process. And CI is a really important piece of that, no question.
Yeah, I think there's a little bit of like a Pandora's box situation where, or maybe the better metaphor here is kind of like a 2 steps forward, 1 step back situation where, you know, as a result, we have so much abstraction in the modern revenue process, right? We've got marketing and then SDR and then AE, and then maybe we got AM and maybe we got CSM, and like maybe there's a little SE thrown in there as well. But it's like, it's definitely a multiplayer game.
Yeah,
right?
it's a team sport for sure.
Yeah, it's a team sport, and that's a new thing because, you know, back in the day when we had a bunch of like lone wolves out in the field doing what they're doing, it was all well and good for them to keep it all in their head or in their little like act gold mine, or like, you know, in their little Rolodex, or fill in the blank, right? Or like maybe their calendar was like their their Palm Pilot was their CRM, or what have you, or even maybe their day timer. Whereas then you have these cloud CRM systems that enable this abstraction, but they're not for collaboration, right? It's just like a database, right? Of like an op or whatever. And like maybe there's stages on it or what have you. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about like how to kind of tame the complexity of that collaboration that has been engendered by this abstraction, but maybe hasn't been like tamed.
Let me see if I can answer it in a really, really simple way that talks about a real example use case. Is that, you know, we see in a lot of customers, a lot of people outside of sales using the product. So product marketing, product management, supply chain, finance. And I'll give you an example is that before Clari's revenue platform, people would find out about competitive issues way too late.
Sure.
Right? They would find out, you know, in a QBR, what was our win-loss ratio. And they'd say, wait, I mean, how did we did what? And it's because they're in different systems, right? So you have all these other revenue critical employees that are now collaborating inside the same platform. They can see in real time the competitive dynamics in a way that was never before possible, Pete, such that they can collaborate. So I'm trying to answer your specific question on an example of how does that, how do we turn on an interface for revenue critical employees who are not salespeople, but they're responsible for helping drive the revenue process, see into just the insights that they need to allow them, in the case of a product manager, to know all the competitive issues where they can help fast. And that's an insight that they now have that they look at every day in the same platform that allows them to collaborate with those reps to say, dude, I can help you with that. I listened to that call. And here's what I would do, right? And that's just the tip of the iceberg of allowing all these other employees into the platform and help them drive better close rates, right? And get to a point where they're not sure. They go from, I'm not sure whether or not we're going to win this deal, to we're very confident we're going to win that against the competition because we've given people early signal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I wasn't thinking about like product marketers and product managers, but I totally hear that, like how that would be impactful. I was even thinking more simplistically around like now that we have these sales motions where, you know, like you have your different epochs of selling, right? Where it's like the on-prem where you're buying for like 3 years, right? Like I worked at VMware long time ago, right? Like you're buying for 3 years and like, we're not even going to be deployed for like 6 to 9 months or what have you, right? So like there's a certain amount of like, you know, complexity and collaboration associated with like selling that deal is very different than even like SaaS 1.0, where you're like selling 2-year contracts of a SaaS platform or what have you, but you're still selling wall to wall. Now people want to take a nibble first, right? They want to take an initial bite. And so what ends up happening is like delivery ends up being paramount, right? From a success standpoint, but in order to then earn the upsell and the expansion. But now oftentimes that like has this like complexity associated with like, okay, cool, close one on the new biz op. And so now it goes off to to CS, but maybe AE is still responsible for the expansion, but that relies on delivery here. And so that information has to come back, and it's just a lot, right? And so I think that that's an example of something that organizations are really contending with right now. And I imagine that's probably a component of the collaboration that you guys are facilitating.
I would say it's a component of both collaboration and governance, and so you hit the collaboration point, but I'll talk about the governance point. Is that, you know, the way I think about it, just the model that you described is, okay, I've got an enterprise go to market, I've got a PLG go to market, I've got a channel driven business, and I've got multiple segments, multiple geos, and I have multiple products that I'm trying to get through, right? And so this is the multi-dimensional rubric of revenue, right? And it's very hard to be able to give the customer the ability to allow them to bespoke build whatever workflows they want, right? And so that's where when we say run revenue, it's the ability to give them a platform that allows them, based on every single customer's different piece, right? Whether they're in the storage business, the security business, they're in the manufacturing business, they're in financial services or healthcare.
It's fussy.
Right. And so the key, the big unlock here is giving them the keys and allowing them to be able to just bespoke build their 13-week cadence, and how from rep to manager to, you know, regional director to geo lead to, we're going to have QBRs and we're going to have a board meeting on how you bespoke offer a user experience that allows the revenue leader to run it all.
Yeah.
And that's the big unlock for companies that allows them to go from leak to precision, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think like, probably the largest sales organization I've run, actually might it be Atrium, because we have 15 reps and 10 SDRs. Yeah, I think that's bigger than Talentpin when we got acquired. And then I was responsible for new product sales at Monster, it's a 1,000-person sales organization. But like, as you get distant from the front line, it's very like nerve-wracking as a leader, right? Because like, you don't, like, I'm sitting here amongst on our sales floor right now, and I hear all of our reps on sales calls right now. That's like, I can reach out, you can touch it, right? But like, the further and further and further you get removed, the harder and harder it is to like understand what's going on and have confidence in that. And I can imagine at that CRO level, wanting to understand that things are being complied to, or like even CFO level, that things are being complied to, that things are happening the way that they ought to. Oh, we have it all documented. Yeah, we have it documented, but are people actually like following the documentation? Like, come now, these are people. These are humans, right? They will find every way of like not following the process. So maybe you could talk a little bit more about like the governance component of that collaboration, and how how enforcement and systematization and authentication comes into play.
Yeah, I mean, first, your commentary about their documented process is so interesting, Pete. And I think this is well, I ask this question of every CRO. Can you send us your well-documented process on how you run your 13-week cadence? And most of them look at us like a deer in the headlights. They go, "What?"
Just send me your sales playbook.
Or they have it, and it's a year old, and they haven't had the time to look at it and to be able to tune it, change it, because the go-to-market changes. They acquired a company. Now that whole model is going to change, to your point, right? So how do you make sure that the right insight is in the right user experience to the right person at the right time in your revenue process, from rep all the way up to the boardroom? So you need to be able to offer that piece out, and the ability for the CRO to know through, the indicators, when the CRO jumps in, can see, who did what call, when, what is the inventory that makes up that call, and what's the risk inside that inventory, right? And if the CRO sees that and sees that, oh, all those forecast calls happen, we had the pipeline reviews, we can see our slip deal reviews that happen, I can see we had an account penetration meeting, I see all of that, and I can see that all of that, and then what are the outcomes associated with that? Then you have true governance end to end of your revenue process, whether it's current quarter, next quarter, looking out for the year. And I'm telling you, what will happen is we will look back 5 years from now and we will say, I can't believe we ran it that way. We'll look at it as like the rotary phone. I can't believe we used to have to stick our finger in that and go like this, Right. It's crazy the way people are running it in systems that are 3 decades old today, CRM, Excel, and BI. And the fact that they bounce in and out, and they ask for a system integrator to come do a custom one-off, and it'll take them 8 weeks to get it stood up in a POC. And that, what they need is an enterprise system that allows them to run revenue. And my metaphor that I always use is that it's interesting that the R in CRM and the R in ERP is not revenue.
Yeah, neither.
Right? And it's revenue. The most important process in the company. It's crazy.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Well, folks, if you have any questions, since we're kind of coming up on time here, Andy, this was really fantastic. I appreciate you taking the time to share your thoughts on the Thrive deck, which I think we can drop back into the chat here. Because I really think that, we think about things in a very similar way, where like what we want to do is we want to find issues and we want to fix them. Like that's our job. Like as leaders, that's our job, right? Whether that's a revenue leak in the form of, kind of what Clari focuses on. In the case of Atrium, what we focus on is we say, hey, look, you got to figure out what the hitch and the giddy up is for that rep. as a manager, and you got to fix that, because it turns out that your sales organization, like the output of it is just the amalgamation of the output of all those reps. And so, identifying the issues, and, to kind of quote Rob, the CEO of HighSpot, kind of figure out what the issue is, and then to prescribe the get well plan, right? So you can get that rep well, or get that team well, or get that product line well in kind of like the broader cases, is a really important. Like that's why we get paid the big bucks, right? Is to fix those things. So folks, if you have any questions, please do take the opportunity to drop that here. Andy, I guess one question that I might have while these are filtering in, we talked about kind of the Wingspan acquisition there. I think you guys had another acquisition recently that was more different type of collaboration, right? It's like not internal collaboration, but it's external collaboration with like mutual planning and what have you. Maybe you can share a little bit about that.
Yeah, so the Wingman acquisition was great. DealPoint was our first acquisition company in Portland that we did about 6 months ago. Great company. And what we loved about that is, it's something that actually is near and dear to my heart, because I've never been able to see, is the customer truly committed to buying?
Yeah.
And does the customer truly agree on the final SOEs to buy? The mutually agreed upon plan. Yes, we do these things. I will buy your product, right? They call them MAPs, or mutual action plans. Yeah. And what's really powerful about, I think, where the industry is headed, irrespective of our acquisition and what our platform can do, is extending out a software interface to the prospects, right? To the current customer, and being able to see, not just in a PLG context, this is how they're using the product, but in a commercial context, this is how we're going to do business together. Okay. Right. And what that does is that at scale now, our customers that have deployed, it's called Clari Align. We officially went GA on it a month ago. Nice. What that allows them to do is actually get signal from what is the customer thinking. They are in an interface that we extend out. And they are now collaborating with Clari and with through Clari to our customers. So I can see, of my commit deals, of which I've got 11.2 million, how many of them have mutual action plans that have been turned on, right? 9.5, and how many of them where we've seen the champion, procurement, and CFO go in to that interface and say, yes, I agree with this timeline. And once you have that signal, that is incredibly powerful signal. That's more powerful than listening to a conversation about, whether or not the rep is saying the right things. So, and that's just another example of a lot of other additional signal, Pete, that I think that, we will be bringing to customers that's really important, that allows them to drive more efficiency, growth, predictability, and let the CEOs know, hey, are they going to meet, beat, or miss? And this is really powerful signal. So that's one.
Yeah, I kind of see to kind of, I do this master class on Moneyball, and Moneyball, it's called Moneyball and Money. So it's essentially sports analytics across eras and across different sports, whether it's baseball or basketball or like hockey or soccer or what have you. And then of course, the revenue equivalent. And there's always, like, with a new source of data, there's new opportunity, right? It's like one thing to listen to our calls. It's another thing to see that we have people like actually checking things up. Back in the day, it was like, hey, we're sending emails and we're touching the customer. Are they replying? They're replying, or is this unrequited love, right? Are they coming back to us? And so like that was obviously a very important signal. It still is a very important signal, but it's not the end all be all. Right, versus someone who's saying like, yes, I commit to this go live date. And so, pulling all that together, I can imagine does a good job of like helping have more confidence. Like, we use mutual planning software here at HUM. We use a company called Accord. My reps really love it for their playbooking, what have you. And it gives you good visibility into, is this thing real? Is this thing real? Which of course is always the $1 million question with sales managers and their reps.
I'll give you an example of the value, Pete. For us, is that we've had the deployment has been crazy across our customer base, and one story for you is that our customers were a customer that we have that's a Fortune 1000 was deployed it in a POC in one region and realized that there was a large portion of their commit deals where the CFO had not seen the contracts, had not agreed to it. They were able to zoom in on that inventory, run plays against that, and then get the CFOs to actually go into the mutual action plans and actually get that signal from them that drove them to actually close those deals. So that's a zoom in example of the value of something that the mutual action plans provide.
Yep. Wonderful. Well, we're out of time. Andy, this was super awesome. I really appreciate it. I think kind of our key takeaways here really were on the various aha moments that you guys have had in kind of your journey along kind of like the founding and development of Clari. The kind of how we can help our customers thrive, not just survive in our current climate, and really moving from an era of revenue leak to one of like diagnosis and remediation and driving to revenue precision, all of which leads to a future state of revenue collaboration and governance. So thank you for kind of like sharing your perspective on like how we ought to be modernizing our sales organizations. Really appreciate it. This is Modern Sales Revenue Excellence Summit, so I think this was very timely. Good conversation here, and thank you very much for your time. Okay.
Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Gina. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.